Okay, in this video, like I said, I'm going to tell you guys my experience in investing with work-related type of investments, be it pensions and or 401ks. And I even had some side investments in the 90s where I was putting money into mutual funds where I put like $40 or $50 a week into a separate thing that I opened up with a bank. Okay, it wasn't connected to work. But in general, most people, when you had a job in the old days, and I'm old enough to where when you had a job, part of your benefits were your paid time off, your vacation. Uh, I'm so old that your health benefits, you didn't pay for them. You just had some sort of health benefits. So if you went to the doctor or something, you went in the office, got some forms, filled it out, and you had an insurance card and that's how it was done. They didn't take nothing out of your paycheck for your health insurance. Like it costs $700 a month now for my wife to have me on her health insurance. Okay, things were a lot different then. But most companies, no matter what you did, back way back 50, 70 years ago, I'm talking, had pension plans. And I think the only one I had is when I worked for the General Electric Corporation. And I think that was a deduction like your taxes went into this pension fund. I don't know if you could opt out or not. I don't remember. But then again, I was getting paid a wage where these deductions were insignificant and you were pretty stupid not to take them. Okay, put it to you that way. They were minuscule. Okay, and you were working for a company that paid a decent wage. So I worked there, and also 401ks were something new. So when I was filling the paperwork out when I got hired, I did the normal pension and all this other stuff. But I was asked, they called it something different, elected savings in like 401ks. I could put up to, depending on the plan, like 5% of my paycheck would go in, and they would match that, half of that, okay, or something like that. Some companies match you dollar for dollar. Others, if you put up 6%, they would pay 50% or 25% of what that deduction was in your check. And that was another thing. And the way this worked is they told you if you put 5% of your wages in and they showed this projection over time, by the time, 35 years later, or actually no, it'd be 40 years later. I was in my 20s. 40 years later, I'd at least have $1 million saved in this account, and it was good. It was some sort of savings account thing, but it was a 401k. So I got that, did all that stuff, and I didn't stay there long. By the time the 90s rolled around, I had to get another job. So I left a big corporation. I got this other job with a smaller company, the General Electric plant. There were two of them. General Electric, between the two facilities, there was like 3,000 workers. So it was a large company. Now I went to another company which is smaller, paid less, and it had 65 people in it, 70 maybe altogether over the time. So I went to a smaller size place, and their retirement thing was you had a 401k program. But this also, the 401ks vary from how your employer sets it up. This one, instead of a pension plan, they had what they call profit sharing. So the account was divided into two. I do my standard 401k with the 5-6% or whatever and a match, and that went into the account. Then every year when the profit was divided up, and with a lot of small manufacturing companies, this was their pension. Going back before 401ks, you had a profit sharing account. So there was so much money deposited for however they divided it up. Like if we made a record profit that year, you got more money. And I think it was for the time that you were there and how long you've been there and all this other stuff. But there was a substantial amount of money placed on the other side of that account. The only catch was I had to work there for 7 to 8 years continuously. Then once I got more than 7 or 8 years, let's say 8 years, I can't remember exactly. But once I worked there, started 9 years, I was vested. That money stayed in my account, and if I left that place of employment and transferred that or rolled that over, I can take it with me. And that is what happened because it was 15 years I worked for that company and I moved. And basically, the company still exists, but we were laid off several times and things were not good at that point in time. So while investing with that, I did quite well because through the 90s, things, some years we made 16% on the money we had in that account one year. It was like a record. So by the time I was 32 years old, I had a substantial amount of money in the mid-90s in that account. Okay? That, what they were saying, if it kept growing like it did then, I would probably have had, close to $1 million in it now. From when I was 30 to now when I'm in my 60s, that would have worked. But that's where we had the first of our problems, okay? And like I said, at this point in time, I did invest in other things. I collected old military firearms, which was a big thing back then. All the old World War II guns and older weapons were being dumped on the market. And they were available quite reasonably, and once they sold out, like to now, after 30 years, what you were paying $100, $120 for, these things go for $800, $900 at auction now. Okay? So that's another factor. The mutual fund that I got, and I was doing this, I was putting 40 or 50 bucks a week in there, that actually grew to a point. And whenever you're dealing with any of your financial advisors, okay, what happens in that time period, I got married, I was going to move and buy another house, and I needed some money for the down payment, like $5,000 or something like that. And I had saved up just in that little mutual fund about $10,000. So I said, I'm going to tell, well, no, you don't want to do that. I said, look, I need that money. So I took that money out and put it for the down payment on this home. Good thing I did. So everything's going on, and that's when we had the first of these bubbles and financial stuff. Through the 90s, the defense plant jobs all went. The General Electric plant eventually closed down. And several years later, it was like so many years later, whatever I put in that pension fund, they sent me a letter and said, it doesn't look like you'll ever be an employee again, you're working somewhere else. And a certain amount of years passed, so you didn't really acquire a lot for a short period of time. They sent me a check for $600 and said, take this check for $600, you are not in our pension system. So then technology, that's when computers, the tech bubble. And I mean, it went up there and things were fantastic. I figured I had the world by the ass. As far as metals, I kind of fooled around. And that's where I got burned on the silver. Silver was up to $7 an ounce. And I accumulated, I'd say, about 80 ounces. And then all of a sudden it dropped to $3.25 an ounce, and it stayed there for about 17 years. So, more on that when I talk about the silver and gold buying. So everything's going great. That tech bubble burst in the 90s or around the turn of the century, and all that money I had in the 401k, I think we lost, 65% loss. I mean, everyone. Right when 9/11 hit, And that's when we had that thing with 9/11, that's when the techno bubble burst. People were buying shares of Amazon or something, all these tech stocks, paying a few dollars a share or less than $1 a share. And I think they went up to $300 a share. And when that tech bubble burst, it all come tumbling down, because a lot of those things in my 401k were like the Janus fund and everything else like that, where, you know, when them shares were worth like $60 a share, then they ended up being worth $5 a share, okay? So we took a loss. This is when I got really upset with this. And, you know, the people, your financial advisors and all these guys telling you to put your money here, put your money there, don't just leave it in the bank and let it sit, because inflation will erode the value of your money, which is true. But if I have $10,000 in the bank, even though with inflation, when my well breaks and the guy comes over and says, we can fix it and get your water back running, but we need a check for $2,000, it's nice to have that money there and just write him the check and away he goes, okay? So having some sort of cash on hand is also important, because trying to get your money out of this crap, if you put it all in a 401k and withdraw it before you're 60 years old, you know, you're going to get penalized. It's going to cost you a ton of money and you'll be taxed. You know, the only thing about the mutual fund, and also when this happened, my mutual fund, I had so many thousands in it, and it's like every month, I wasn't watching it, every month it would drop like 500,000 in value, and it was gradually going down. I remember the one balance, and for some reason I needed money, and I looked, and that balance had dropped a lot, so I just called them on the phone and said, close it out, just shut the whole thing down, send me a check, okay? So I salvaged something out of that. But if I didn't pay attention and lost a lot of money, I could have lost just about all of it. Okay? This is when I kind of got really upset. I decided that 401k is a joke. Okay? And I stopped putting money in at a point in time. And that's when I started to go and get into buying silver, because it was still under about 325 to 4, I started stacking silver. I'll go into that in another video, but that's what I was doing to offset the silver I already had at the $7 or 7 something an ounce. You just buy more and then spread your loss out. And actually what I did is I just waited until silver got up to about $20 an ounce at one point, and then that's when I sold all of it and kind of washed my hands. But going back to the stocks, even now, what I salvaged from my 401ks, and I mean, I would put some money in there, it would go up again, it would start building, and then there's some sort of recession or something else, and then it drops, I lose 50% of the value. And they keep telling you, well, you know, you're young, just keep going with it, and, you know, it goes up again. And then again, finally, I haven't had placed anything in a 401k in over 15 years, okay? Not a dime, all right? And this will go up from one, well, I got to take that back. Maybe there were some places that they kind of force you, and they make it difficult for you. You have to really go out of your way, go in there, fill out papers, beg them to stop taking the deductions out. But then if you only work at the company for 3 to 5 years and you don't have $5,000 in there, when you change your job, within a few months, this company, this investment company is calling you and saying, hey, you got less than $5,000, you got to take this money out or roll it over, or we're just issuing you a check and you're going to pay the penalties and everything. So I went and put them into one little IRA. There was like 3 different jobs I had. I had to put this money in there to amount it to, you know, so many thousand. And then once I got to the age of 60 and was short on my bills, I just withdrew the money out. You know, had to pay Huh? Yeah, I had to pay taxes on it and just use it to pay my bills. It was less than $10,000 there. So it wasn't a huge sum of money, okay? But it's still my money, and I really don't like paying penalties on money that I earned, okay? And when you do put it in them little IRAs, the way the interest rate was, they don't pay nothing, okay? You know, if you have, say, $8,000 in there, it may pay $5 a year in interest, okay? So it wasn't going nowhere. So investing in these things was not a good deal, okay? Even CDs and that weren't a good deal because the interest rates were at zero for so long and the economy was stagnated. So in the end, after 30 years, I have just about the same amount of money in this 401k account than I did way back in 1992. Okay? There's something there, but it ain't that $1 million like everyone said. And I don't have a pension. And then a lot of these old timers going back to the 90s and back to after that big financial crash in around 2000, 2001, there were a lot of people who were getting pensions from companies like Bethlehem Steel. Okay, people worked there 40 years of their life. They were getting a pension check for about $2,500 a month on top of your Social Security. Yeah, then you're retired. You can pay all your bills and just live the rest of your days out without working. Well, when Bethlehem Steel shut down and went bankrupt, that pension fund dropped. It was cut in half. And there were people on the news, well, I don't know how I'm going to make ends meet. You know, I might lose my home. And there were companies, excuse me. And the reason silver dropped also is silver was used in photography, in digital photography and cameras and Polaroid cameras and all this stuff went out the window. So there was a huge demand for silver that was gone. You know, with digital, like right now, it's digital. This isn't an old movie 8mm or Super 8 movie camera where I got to send it out, get it developed. Silver is used in making the film, and silver is used in the processing of film and producing actual hard photographs. Okay? All of that went out the window, and silver stayed low for a very long time. Okay? Now you get to the point where, you know, like I said, people lost their pensions. Now companies don't have pensions. If you go to a company now, it's very rare to find one with a pension. A lot of them I work for, if they did have it, there was a date they closed it off. So say you worked there for 10 years, well, they said after this point we're not taking anybody's money anymore, so you might end up with a pension check for $300 or something because you only worked there 10 years, you know, after you retire. So pensions are pretty much gone. And actually, talking about film, I remember a guy telling me that Polaroid was a separate company and Polaroid is closed. Some of these companies like Polaroid, all of a sudden one day you get a letter, they're bankrupt, their pension fund has just been depleted. You're not getting a pension check anymore. Not as it being cut in half, it's just not there. And if you were relying on that as a source of income, now you got a problem. But that's a lot of the older stuff. Now, a lot of you younger guys, you're not going to see that because there are no pensions. You got your 401k, which I don't trust any of that. And like I told you, putting money in there, it you know, my personal feelings is it's a ripoff. Okay? Because after 30 years, I'm where I was. And it goes up, it went up, and I was looking at it, and I had to pay a bill, and I was thinking of taking out $10,000, and I was hemming and hawing. My wife said maybe we shouldn't touch that. Then all of a sudden, the damn account dropped $20,000. And I still had to take the money out to take care of this financial crisis. So I took care of it, And then they said, well, now you're drawing stuff out. You have to transfer from your stocks to a cash fund, which used to always be about $300. And that's how they get their maintenance fee. There's like a $30 or $60, or every so often they maintain my account. Okay? So there is a fee that, that's why they got that little cash fund. Now they said, well, if you're drawing things out and we're issuing you a check, you got to take another 1,000 out of the stocks and leave that in a cash pool. And I guess when I transferred that 1,000, I'm looking, now that cash balance is like $700. So basically drawing money out, it looks like, because I took the money out, they charged me $300 for that or something. I don't know. I don't know how it works. But I've watched it, and just like when you're into stacking, you're watching all of these videos. And I mean, these people do sit down and they show you the data. They show you this, they show you that, the Fed, this and that. How is it going to affect gold and silver prices? And they're right, but you will drive yourself insane. And there's everything out there from where gold and silver are going to take off like a rocket and, get a 50% increase or more. And then some people are saying it's going to have a detrimental dip coming up. So you don't know one way or the other what to do. But from my experience, the stock market and 401ks are not a winner, especially the past 20 years. They really didn't do well. Okay, I think you would have lost. If I kept paying in there so much, I probably would end up with the same amount. I would have lost that. All that putting the money in, I believe, is throwing it out the window. I'd rather put it into something, like, say if I took a small, what I did is I used to put it in savings until I got sick. And fortunately I did that. I took 6% of my paycheck and put it in a savings account. And when I had heart surgery and was out of work for over a year and a half, I kind of used that money as an emergency. And, there was no penalties I didn't have to go through. I just would pay my bills with that money. I found that a good way, even though most financial people tell you do not put money in a savings account because inflation will eat it away. Granted, that's true, but you always need to be some liquid form of cash that, I can transfer that, write a check, or, pay with a debit card a bill with that money. So that's my feelings on investing in stocks, the 401k, and everything else. So that's my input. You use that. And, I'm talking from back, probably a lot of you people weren't born back in the 80s, how it's transpired all these years and where I am now as an old man, So that's my advice. All right, hit the like button, subscribe, and stay tuned.